Hello! And welcome to Modern Media Review number 50, the podcast that's too busy recreating the past to live in the future. I'm Robin Gibson.
And I'm Sean Gollogly.
And do you know where that line about recreating the past and living in the future comes from, Sean? It's not Nietzsche, mate, it's Confessions of a Pop Group by the Style Council, which I think all should agree is Paul Weller's best work.
I was a big Café Blur fan, but I got lost musically and sometimes literally after about 1985 and was just only coming out of the musical wilderness by about 1988. And the real low, Robin, was buying Mr. Mister's Broken Wings 12-inch styling.
I don't think that's going to make any lists of the 80s, but no, actually, Confessions of a Pop Group is the last Style Council album that came out, which I think is his all-time masterpiece, but it got totally slated. Okay. There were still people hanging around hoping he'd sort of drop the three-piece classical suites and appearances by the Swingle Singers and Jammin' Lewis style R&B and go back to seaside rock. And they did get their wish years later with his solo career. You got to check the title track out though, it's about as vicious an anti-Thatcher diatribe as he ever came up with. Starts with the line cheap and tacky bullshit land, which is a great first line. Anyway, why are we talking about recreating the past and not living in the future?
Well,
I mean, we're not. It was just a good intro. I've been living in the future ever since I gave up on the present. So as far as I'm concerned, it's next week, and I've done everything I was putting off till tomorrow. It's a very efficient way of operating, you know.
That's a bit of a difficult one for me, Robin, because it's a bit like, you know, when you go to bed and hope that it's 6 months later when you wake up.
That's only hope. Faint hope you've got there. I've got a system for living. But, you know, other people are recreating the past, aren't they? And I was reading a big article about Kraftwerk the other day.
What, a big
the London
one?
Review of Books. Yeah, big article, yeah. You know the LRB, it's like a print version of Modern Media Review. Anyway, the article was by Ian Penman, who used to write these long, big, infuriating articles in NME, and they always had quotes from philosophers at the beginning.
Very impressive.
Well, but in my naivety, I thought they were from actual books that they'd read. When in fact, you know, I later found out you could just buy a big dictionary of philosophy quotes to select and abuse at will. Select and abuse at will, that sounds quite Nietzsche, you know.
It does, actually.
Anyway, he's better now, Ian Penman, not Nietzsche. And he quoted a really interesting term from the Kraftwerk book, retrofuturism, by which he says the Kraftwerk writer means a form of nostalgia for a future that was never realised.
Which makes a change from nostalgia for a past that never existed.
Well, there are many confusing versions of nostalgia for things that never were nowadays, aren't there? But it does bring us round nicely to our subject, which is National Album Day, which is this Saturday. Actually, tomorrow, I think.
Absolutely.
Which we're going to examine for a bit of light relief amid COVID and Trump. But it's actually taken on a sinister retro-futuristic vibe itself this year with
what?
A themed launch for the 80s. National Album Day is good though. It's almost as good as National Margarine Day. National Roll Plug Day I like, and National Octopus Day, which was genuinely yesterday. And we were going to have a big street party.
I was amazed that you told me yesterday was National Octopus Day.
Well, it was. And we were going to have a big street party. But not for Octopus Day, for National Album Day. And we had a big banner of Dire Straits hung out. And
oof.
We got crates of Bash Shandy and Baby Sham. You know, 80s style stuff. But Nicola Sturgeon has banned all gatherings of dubious adult-orientated rock.
Oh, she's such a spoiler. She's such a spoiler.
She don't like people drinking, that's for sure. And the only street parties you're allowed are for Hootsmon, you know, by Lord Rockingham's 11, which I haven't got a copy of anymore. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a bit here. But talking of parties,
okay.
Do you know about Tim Burgess's Twitter listening parties? Tim's Twitter listening parties where people go on Twitter and discuss albums while they play them. He's been enlisted to the NAD cause, and they did Brothers in Arms. They've been doing these 80s albums. I think it's quite fitting that Tim Burgess steps in to help celebrate the 80s because he stepped in inverted commas, accidentally over a picket line, to host Lauren Laverne's show during the BBC strike in 2013, which is very 1980s.
Robin, have you been looking this up on the internet?
No, I remember it distinctly. Tim Burgess, the strike breaker. People have, it's all strike breaking under the bridge now, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Very 80s though. And anyway, that was 6 music. We're going full mobility scooter and going for Radio 2, aren't we? It was you that picked up on this. I guess.
Hey,
you were
that
listening...
sounds very accusatory, you.
Weren't you listening to Radio 2?
Hang on a minute, mate. Don't tar me with that Radio 2 brush, because I'm pretty hardcore Heart FM and Radio Jackie, to be honest.
Radio Jackie?
Yeah. The sound of Southwest London, man.
Is it?
Yeah.
Not round my part of Southwest London, is it?
No, because most of them, they'd be playing ABBA, so you wouldn't get Stormzy on it.
No drill.
Strictly no drill.
Okay. Oh, do you ever listen to Radio 2, though? I mean... It came in the car the other day by accident.
No, it didn't. You had it programmed. It's
just it's one of those digital radios that's a bit wayward. I mean, who is this station aimed at? Some sort of care home club run by Joe Biden or David Attenborough or that woman. You know, that woman is the world's oldest woman. You should get a free Parker pen for just tuning into it.
Well, it's like those final expenses, Robin, isn't it? You know, you have to do. But my God, I did look up. I know I suggested this Radio 2 thing.
We better explain that we're talking about Radio 2 because they've pitched in for National Album Day with a poll of the best album of the 80s.
And you know the most annoying thing about it, Robin, is they don't allow you to choose your best album.
No, of course not. It would be mayhem. People would be putting in, you know, Crass or
Crispy Ambulance?
Yeah, something like that, or some really obscure stuff. I mean, they've had to go with the mainstream flow, haven't they? And Gary Davies is promoting it, isn't he?
He is.
Look at him on the pro. How old is he?
Oh my God.
He's trying to look like I suppose he's trying to look like a sort of heavy, hot hunk from the 80s.
Ooh, that sounds disturbing.
He makes Jeremy Clarkson look dignified, mate.
I went onto the website and I looked at Gary Davies, and oh my God, he looks like he's had a stroke, Robin.
Yes.
The whole side of his face is sort of like crumbling. There might be a little bit behind the lines about this, and I'm going to go tangential on this, Robin, because my parents used to have a nursing home.
It was better than being in one.
But here's the thing, you'd play afternoon music to the old folks, yeah? And it would be stuff like the Ink Spots or Vera Lynn. But to quote ABC, that was then, but this is now.
Well, they're actually ABC are then now.
Lexicon of Love is in the...
Yeah, they're very then. Anyway, carry on.
But it's like, can you imagine if you went into an old people's home now? Christ almighty, Robin. They'd be ripping up the chintz sofas to MC5, Kick Out the Jams, or Pistols, Anarchy in the UK? No?
Well, if they were, they should be playing that on Radio 2. Anyway, neither of those bands are from the 80s, but I looked at the Radio 2 list and I thought, okay, it's mainstream, it's a bit limiting. I mean, they've put in bloody Deacon Blue.
Scottish band? Band?
I mean, let's face it, no, they're not a definitive, it's not a definitive album of the 80s, is it? There's nothing by Dixie's Midnight Runners or the Style Council.
Or the Specials.
Well, the Specials only had one real sort of album in the 80s, didn't they? It wasn't really a proper album. But, I mean, they could have a UB40. There's sort of sum up the 80s, a dull scum folk heroes. Or, like the others, I thought, New Order and ZZ Top, because they started all those synths and sequencers, and they sort of made the 80s safe for the post-punk stragglers and the sort of crumbly rockers. They all jumped on the bandwagon, didn't they?
Hang on, what about Japan?
Surely Japan are more important than Deacon Blue. Jesus. And what about R.E.M. or Talking Heads? I mean, I don't even like them. They're sort of nerdy, sort of intellectual tossers, really. But they got to be more essential than Deacon Blue.
I was surprised, and then I must say that I wasn't surprised that U2 got into the top 80s albums.
No, they weren't very popular, were they?
With their tiresome, Robin, their tiresome Joshua Tree. You know the one where Bono and the boys are on the cover, and they've obviously been to Mr. Ben's fancy dress shop, looking very earnest in their cowboy outfits in the Californian desert. And meanwhile, while this was going on, we had the second Summer of Love going on with Acid and all that sort of stuff, you know?
And Paul Weller making a house album that Polydor wouldn't even release. Anyway, the only guy who's made the list twice, George Michael. He was in with Wham and as himself.
Fair enough.
Well, it sort of upsets me. Not that there's anything wrong with George, but he sort of sums up the whole retrofuturism thing, doesn't he? The whole list, right? The unrealised future. You know, this unrealised future nostalgic for. It's the Big Bang, the glitz of Phil Collins with the jacket sleeves rolled up, yuppies listening to him and Dire Straits, and all frosted over with a nice 80s icing of leftover 70s racism and homophobia and mass unemployment and, you know, disdain for men over 26 using a bus and all that. And it led to nothing. What's it led to?
Seriously, this whole Dire Straits thing really bugs me off because I quite liked their first album, you know?
Okay.
It's true, I did. And then they came out with this bloody brother-in-arms thing, yeah? And it makes me spew, Robin, because you have these over-leveraged wannabe yuppies in their open-top Golf GTIs, yeah? Spinning themselves around Isha and the likes of it, playing this album. The only upside for me was that they were going to get their motors repossessed when interest rates went to 15%. And I tell you what, never mind bloody Dire Straits, Phil Collins. I'm sorry, but Robin, if Phil Collins is the answer, what on earth is the question?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, perhaps which 80s fucking rock star finished with his wife by fax?
It goes with the territory. Everyone did everything by fax, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know. Where do we start and where do we finish? Should we do a compare and contrast on what was going on in the 80s? You know, is it better now than it was then? I hated the 80s. It was my worst decade ever because what you had was braying twats with their braying red braces burning £20 notes in front of the homeless. Or the other side of it was you had earnest folk marching around asking for jobs, no bombs, a decent education, a health service.
Yeah, with Paul Weller, with the Style Council in the background.
Yeah, and Christ, where do we go with fashion? Where were we with fashion? What was your haircut like in the 80s?
Different styles, I won't bother getting into it.
Well, I had a bit of a John Taylor, Duran Duran, early 80s.
Feathery.
Well, yeah, wee feathery cut. Bit updated from Rod Stewart. And the only reason I did it, Robin, was because the girls like Duran Duran.
That's a fairly good reason for having a haircut.
But here's the worst of it, Robin. I ended up somewhere, as I said, I got lost somewhere after about 1985. I started wearing some weird red slip-ons. Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
Well, you were then a sort of fairly good exemplar of the vile dystopia that didn't usher in a golden age.
No, it didn't.
This is the future that was never realised, because instead somehow it's led to war, austerity, and Trump and Johnson.
I know, it's so awful. Do you know what, Robin? I think we should stop for plugging. Yeah,
we'll stop and just say, before we get into any more analysis of 80s music, which is going to be very interesting, maybe I could put some whacking loud drum sound in the background. If you like the podcast, Modern Media Review, don't forget to subscribe, follow, or whatever you do on whatever platform you're listening to it on. That'll be YouTube, or it could be Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, any of them nowadays, really.
Blimey.
You know, it gets out there now, Sean. That's the internet for you. And, we got a website as well, modernmediareview.com, so you can go there if you like. Got the podcast on it. Enjoy, share, pass the news if you think it's any good, and complain if you don't.
So, listen, Robin, am I going to indulge you now in some 80s music? A favourite band of mine from your part of the world, Simple Minds.
Are they not on the list?
No, but New Gold Dream, shocked face emoji.
Yeah, I agree.
That this is not in there. Mind you, after some groundbreaking work, Jim, he did sort of shoot himself in the foot a little bit, didn't he? When he followed you two on the Ernest Express to pompous Arseville.
Oh yeah, he did. But I can't see that Radio 2 and Gary Davies have gone through that convoluted reasoning to keep them off the shortlist. And were you saying there's nothing for the Police or Sting?
Oh, unbelievable. Now, I'm not Sting's biggest fan.
No.
But if you take the two of them, the Police and Sting, as...
They were quite popular.
My God, is this not a surprise? Sting, in both incarnations, had a massive run of albums. Synchronicity, Ghost in the Machine, may not be your cup of tea, Robin, but he also did Dream of the Blue Turtles.
That's right. As Viz Comics said of Dream of the Blue Turtles, the first album written, produced and released entirely up someone's arse.
Which is very harsh.
Well, it's probably true. If the police should be complaining, what about status quo, mate?
Shut up.
But no,
No.
First they get banned from Radio 1 for being old-fashioned and have to complain, and now they're denied a shot at best album of the 80s, even though, get this, just supposing, in the army now, I did look this up, and ain't complaining, 3 among 6 gold disc albums they put out in the 80s.
Shut up.
Time they send another stiff letter to the BBC, I think. What's amazing is that while they complained to Radio 1 and it had no effect whatever, and Radio 1 just kept not playing status quo records, when they complained to the UN for being on the bad list for playing at Sun City, the UN apologised to them and thanked them for their support in the fight against apartheid. I've seen the evidence, I've seen the letters.
How come Status Quo got an apology from the UN?
All you had to do was apologise yourself and then the UN would apologise to you.
For you.
There's probably some war criminals that are missing out on this simple way of getting out of stuff, you know?
Oh, I apologise for all that terrible Holocaust I did.
Yeah, talking though of like Police and UB40 and bands like that, we've got to mention reggae, haven't we?
It doesn't even get a mention, Robin.
Well, it does, because there's a very simple trajectory to reggae in Radio 2 world. The only album on there is Legend, the Bob Marley compilation.
Yeah.
Which clearly commemorates the day reggae was closed down by Gary Davies. And all the producers and artists in Jamaica were quarantined. And they've been stuck there for 40 years. And, you know, they've been resistance and civil disobedience. And you do hear of some good records coming out of Jamaica. But largely, it's of no interest to anyone since Bob Marley died, isn't it? I've got about 20 albums by Sizzler. That's just one artist. But you wouldn't really know, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
Not on Radio 2. They had a brief revival the other day when Toots Hibbert died.
Yeah, so they played Pressure Drop, once or twice?
But largely it's frozen in time to Gary Davies. But there is a sprinkling of black music for white people in the list. You know, it's not just Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? It's not just Michael Jackson, Whitney and Tina and Grace Jones. I mean, they've put in Public Enemy and De La Soul, which suggests there's a bit of a 1980s NME reader crossover with Radio 2 nowadays, doesn't it?
Okay.
But there's nothing by LL Cool J at Run DMC, which is surely more Radio 2. Or Marvin Gaye, Midnight Love, would got to be one of the most important soul albums of the decade. Anyway, we complain about the list all day. It's pretty boring, isn't it? But the result is going to be announced very soon, tonight. And I don't think I'll be listening to it because I've got some roll plugs to fit. And I'm going to fry the octopus I got yesterday. But we should try and call the result.
Okay, you're a betting man, Robin. How would you call it?
Well, no, you go first.
Okay, I'm going to say, and it's a cast iron certainty odds on. And it's Jacko and Thriller.
You reckon?
Well, put it this way, Robin. It's certainly not going to be Soft Cell's Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret, you know, because I can't ever see Sex Dwarf getting played on the BBC Radio 2.
No, I can't see Sex Dwarf and Gary Davies going together either. Personally, I think it should either be Dare by Human League or Club Classics by Soul to Soul, because they're the two albums that pointed where music was going. One at the beginning of the decade and one at the end. But it'll probably be Deacon Blue.
It won't be Deacon Blue, mate.
No, it won't. It'll be Thriller. No, but will it? I'm skipping Jacko and I'm going for Control by Janet Jackson, the real genius in the Jacksons, who...
Absolutely no chance, mate.
If she was a man, she would be acclaimed as Prince. And on that basis, I'm going to change my opinion and go for Prince because he was a man.
There's no way that Prince is going to win it.
Going for Purple Rain, mate.
No.
He's a male and he's a man.
He wore a thong.
Anyway, that's enough. That's enough of Radio 2's somewhat Radio 2 heavy list, isn't it? Let's get back to National Album Day.
Okay.
This has always bugged me even more than National Roll Plug Day.
Does it stick in your craw, Robin?
It does. I mean, this is its third year, and they're already reduced to making it a theme. Arguably music's greatest decade, the 80s. I mean, who's arguing that?
Well...
It's no worse than any other.
Don't forget, Robin, you always have to fill airtime. Do you know what I mean? So, surely this is like, we'll be trumpeting the 80s today, and tomorrow we'll be trumpeting the 70s.
I've got a big problem with this album business anyway. Like, there should be a National Filler Day. You know, like all the young lives tragically ruined by saving up for weeks for a new album and then finding there was only about 3 good tracks on it.
Now, do you know what, Robin? You're sounding like a very old man here, because this is what we used to do, was you'd wait and you wait and you wait and you go rushing out to the record store and you'd buy at our price records for about, what was it, $2.99, and you'd rush it home, feel the album, feel the 12-inch vinyl in your hands, and suddenly realise that, yeah, like you say, there was only 3 decent songs on it.
Well, exactly. I mean, I could name a few, but there's too many to mention. The great thing about things like Spotify is you can just blip out the track that's shit. A lot of albums are much better reduced to an EP.
Well, you're so fashionably modern that that's what you do. Whereas I'm still quite old school, is I will put the album on the turntable and play it and still be disappointed.
Exactly, because the whole concept's flawed, right? With the running time and all that. It was only that length because that's what fits on 2 sides of 12-inch vinyl.
Ah, don't ruin it. Don't ruin it, Robin.
It's like saying every book should be 300 pages long. Imagine that. Imagine if publishers had said, I'm afraid every book will have to fill 300 pages. There'd be no Animal Farm or Things Fall Apart. Or even We, or any big airport bonkbusters, or Hilary fucking Mantel for that
Well,
matter.
in fairness...
Too long.
But I still have this weird thing, Robin, and if we're going to talk about the 80s, this is part of the 80s, is how you felt you had to own stuff.
Well, you could turn that around and say you felt you had to buy stuff from the record companies.
Yes, okay.
Because that was their preferred medium in exchange for cash, black vinyl.
But the funniest thing, Robin, was not only did you have to buy it in vinyl, but you couldn't record it, you also had to buy the tape as well.
You were being doubly ripped off. Anyway, I was down at Aldi the other day and I noticed they've got a little section.
Oh, you love Aldi, don't you? You love Aldi.
Well, yeah, but in between the light bulbs and some other household goods, it had a rack saying mixed vinyl records, which I thought was great. Like you could buy them by the kilo.
So, what did they have?
Oh, I didn't look at them. They've got a little thing on the thing saying jazz, Elvis, love, whatever love music is, and rock and roll. So a good selection. That's it. Come on, let's be honest. That's what they're just albums. This cult of the artifact is ridiculous. I listened to someone the other day talking about some book saying, "Oh, it's a beautiful book," but not about what it was like to read. This all started in the 80s with, the face and all that typography.
You're part of that problem. You love a bit of typography.
Yeah, but I don't value it above the content. And you used to buy records to listen to. Now apparently people buying these albums down at Aldi or whatever, National Album Day, just to display them. I mean, I hope people listen to this podcast and don't just display it.
Well, perhaps we're talking about the cult of artifice. Clever marketing people, marketing stuff to people desperate to impress their mates, friends, with the right books, obviously unread, of course, and walls of vinyl.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on though, Robin. That sounds a bit like me.
Well, you only need to look at the talking heads on the COVID news bulletins and their studies full of unread books. And, as we mentioned before, Pat Nevin with his records pinned to the wall.
Yes.
He ain't getting them down and playing them, is he? I don't think it's the cult of artifice. I think it's the cult of capitalism.
Ooh.
I mean, look at the
Ooh.
National Album Day Twitter feed. Everyone's in on it. HMV, who are trying to sell you a white vinyl Psychedelic Furs album, which they can't even spell. They spell psychedelic with an A in the middle, for God's sake. Ponzi speaker manufacturers saying what album's best to play through these ludicrous speakers.
Now, Robin, I'm going to sound like a very old man here. And you did pull it up that Psychedelic Furs was misspelt. At what stage did people ever forget spelling, grammar and punctuation?
That boat has sailed, mate.
Okay.
Language develops. Punctuation's on the way out.
Oh no, you're going to go right. You're going to go right fruity on me now, going, "Oh, it's a developing thing, Sean."
It's a developing thing. Unlike what isn't developing is National Album Day, because they are going to have to keep going back to past decades because no one's going to be making albums from now on, are they? Because according to Rishi Sunak, these so-called creatives need to retrain and get viable jobs.
Viable?
Yeah.
Is his job viable?
For the time being, yeah.
Yeah,
Until he gets found out.
Fucking hell.
I've just been down to B&Q and Phil Collins was working down there. He was...
Did he have his...
jacket sleeves rolled up? No.
Yeah.
He was having to wear an apron. And He was explaining the screw sizes to some shoppers. But he said he's looking forward to National Roll Plug Day.
Well, what he should be looking forward to is finishing his missus via fax.
They didn't have a fax machine down there. He was getting very confused. I said this email's great. You can email anyone. It's fantastic.
Well, the great thing would be if Lidl, in their Thursday aisle, put a fax in there.
It would be, yeah.
Would you buy it?
I would. I'll let him know the next time I'm down there. Anyway, talking of the next time, which is a very lame way to finish. I think we'd better finish.
Oh, that's a really, really poor link.
So just to recap, our choices for winner of the Radio 2 poll are Sean.
Thriller.
And me, Purple Rain. And on that...
Laughable. How much do you want me to lay you for that?
On that Nostradamus-like note, we're going to say thanks very much for listening. Aren't we?
Yes, thanks very much for listening.
Okay, and till next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.